Want to know the latest and hottest music hitting the airwaves? Don't be left out. Listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Music Podcast. Keith keeps you on the loop with everything you need to know from pop, rock, hip-hop, and the top 40. And we'll throw in news of your favorite artists, concert and tour dates, and so much more. Listen no further, because this is the gold standard in music podcast.
Hello and welcome to GSMC Music Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Cynthia.
And I am your lovely co-host, Keith.
If you guys didn't hear the very first episode Keith and I did, I called him lovely.
It really threw me off. She was like, tell me about yourself. And I had
did
no idea
it
what to
because
say.
when I do the health and wellness and the entertainment podcast with Sarah, and she kept saying lovely, so I don't know why that adjective just stayed in my head. But
I mean, I like to think of myself as lovely.
It is what it is, you know. But how's your week been, Keith?
Pretty good. Just getting ready for Thanksgiving, as everybody else is.
I know, tomorrow. I'm so excited.
It's been really cold in
finally,
Northern California. I know, at the end of November.
I know. It's been warm the entire first half of the month, and then just yesterday we had rain for the first time in months. So I was pretty excited. The only thing was, I have a dog, a husky, and our gate flew open because the wind was extremely heavy, and the gates flew open and he ran out, so we had to go chase him. He ran out 3 times.
Oh, geez.
3 times, and so we had to go out in the rain and the crazy wind and get him. And for us California people, that's such a pain in our rear end. So if you're anywhere where there's way harsher weather, then you're probably like, oh, you're such a baby.
Yeah. Like if you live in Detroit and the wind comes up and freezes the waves on the docks.
I know. I would not be able to.
Sympathy.
That's why I don't think I could ever live outside of California.
Why would you want to?
I mean, unless taxes and stuff keep rising, I'm going to have to.
This isn't the political podcast.
I know. And you guys, we have a lot of we're doing a new music genre this week. And it's one that I'm honestly not that educated on. So it was really interesting for me to pick out a couple of albums, which for this week, by the way, we chose alternative, what other genres, dance, pop.
Yeah, we tried to lean on an alternative, electronic, dancey feel.
Mm-hmm. And which is definitely not my field of music, but I feel like, Keith, you're more into that style, are you? Is that something you're more, maybe not these particular albums we're going to be talking about today, but that genre?
Yeah, I mean, I feel pretty at home in most genres. I definitely would say I probably primarily, I used several P words there, listen to alternative, but just as a general rule, I kind of just enjoy music that fills a unique space or does something interesting. So that usually ends up being alternative, though.
Oh, see, there we go. But so the very first album we're going to be reviewing is our alternative album of the week, which is Lana Del Rey's Norman Effing Rockwell. Of course, there's a cuss word in there, so can't say it. But I wanted to ask your opinion, Keith, because I was a little confused as to why this album was labeled as an alternative album. Just because to me, when I think of alternative, in our last podcast, I told you I listened to Paramore. So when I think of alternative, I think of those kind of bands, not so much Lana Del Rey. So would you consider, after listening to the album, would you consider Lana Del Rey as alternative?
I think people kind of throw genres around pretty liberally in today's music landscape. So alternative usually refers to this music is more sad than normal music. But other than that, I don't think there's a lot of defining lines. It used to be that alternative rock was pop with slight variation. But nowadays there's so much out there music wise that it's almost impossible to put anything into a genre. So I guess this
it's like an umbrella of different things.
Yeah, so this could fall under the umbrella of like general alternative, though I would say this is definitely like more reminiscent of like alternative pop from the early 2000s / late 90s. A lot of these songs sounded like I'd heard them before. Like a couple of the songs that Lana, is it Lana or Lana?
I think Lana. Okay. Lana Del Rey, yeah.
Okay, so I mow my lawn, Del Rey.
See, that was a dad joke, you guys.
I am full of them, unfortunately. But yeah, no, it's some of them pretty much sounded straight up like Liz Phair. Escape from, what was the name of that record?
Who is Liz Phair?
She did one song that you would definitely know that I can't remember the name of right now, but she's like one of those classic strong female figures from the early 2000s / late 90s music scene. And they did all of that, like basically all of their songs are like I'm Like a Bird, I Want to Fly Away, or like what's that other song, I Will Go Down with This Ship. I can't remember.
I'm at a blank too right now, but
yeah,
I get what you're saying.
Lana Del Rey, the whole record pretty much felt like those two songs, the I'm Like a Bird, I Want to Fly Away, and then I Will Go Down with This Ship. Whatever.
Ooh, hitting us with the vocals right there.
Yeah.
That was good. You were high. You were high. That was good.
It's all in the falsetto. Yeah. I actually was in a Bee Gees cover band in my early 20s.
Really?
No.
Oh. No, total lie. Total lie.
You have to play two lies and a truth on this podcast.
Oh my, I would lose because I wouldn't even know what to lie about. I'm like, I would just stutter.
Is there winning and losing at that?
I mean, if people guess your lie right away.
I didn't know that it was a game. I thought it was just like a fun thing that you did to.
I don't know. It just brought me back to like my elementary school days. Icebreakers, like tell two truths and a lie.
Oh, so, yeah. Oh, and I guess if like you're going to get kids to participate in something, you usually have to give them an incentive.
Right.
Yeah. So what did you think about the record?
So I know, going back on topic. So Lana Del Rey's album, I first heard of Lana. I used to religiously listen to her back in high school, like 2011, 2012. I found out the very first song that I discovered her was Summertime Sadness. And I was like obsessed with that song. I'm not sure why, because I just listened to it on the way here to the studio. And most of her songs are like ballads, right? And like kind of like sad girl vibes. And
yeah, she's got that alto voice that's very strong. She's like a sad girl's Adele.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like that's why a lot of people connect with her. Like just her lyrics alone. She's lyrically gifted. I will say that. Just a lot of things that she talks about in her music, you have to really kind of sit and pick apart like what's the underlying meaning. Like this isn't, when I was listening to this album, to be honest, I was kind of like snoozing, and I think it's because I wasn't listening to like the right environment. I was actually playing the record on my way to the studio today, and I definitely will say don't play this album while you're driving, because I'm not kidding. It made me kind of sleepy. Like I was like, I had to just pause for a minute. I feel like I would have liked the project a lot more if I would have just taken it by bits and pieces, like listen to one of the songs in like a shuffle playlist, just because it gets a little too like slow for me personally. I know a lot of people may disagree with me. That's just my personal opinion. But overall, I did think it was a very unique project. She has a very unique sound. I love that. It's almost like she's purring in her lyrics. That's what, like, I love it. I love her voice.
Do we know that if she writes her own lyrics?
I believe so, because according to Pitchfork, they actually named her as one of the best songwriters of our time right now.
Oh.
So I'm assuming that
it's a prestigious award.
It is. But I do think, I have read like other articles, I think also on Time Magazine, they also said how she writes all of her lyrics. I'm sure she might have like a co-writer, someone who kind of might pitch her ideas. But for the most part, she does write her own lyrics. Many of the lyrics within her songs, I forgot the very last track on the record. I think it's called, I'm going for a blank right now. something about when girls having hope. It's the very last song.
Oh, yeah.
Something about when girls have hope. Oh my God, I can't remember the name.
Hope is a dangerous thing for a woman is the last track on the record.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that one is just her singing over a piano ballad, and she's talking about personal things that have happened in her life, like her father passing. And so I do think she writes the majority of her lyrics just because there's a lot of personal touches within her music.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I definitely do appreciate the lyricism in the songs. This isn't necessarily like a record that I'm going to go back and listen to over and over again. I found most of it to be pretty kind of like monotonous. A lot of the songs kind of ran into each other because they felt like they sounded the same, which is, fine. You kind of get the same vibe when you're listening to like a Rage Against the Machine record, but in the opposite direction. Like all these songs sound the same, but they're aggressive and angry. Whereas like Lana Del Rey is like, well, all of these songs sound the same, but that's because they're kind of like sad and reflective and they're intentionally kind of sounding the same. But I mean, so to sum up the record, like what would you rate it out of 10? I mean, aside from the pretty good cover of, what is it, Doing Time? She did a cover of Doing Time on there. Yeah,
I love the album cover. I love the pop art. It reminds me of like a comic book. I don't know why. I just really like that. She represents to me like 60s beauty. I know she really loves that era, like the whole thick wing eyeliner and the bump in front of her hair. So I do like that she ties in her, I guess, her image and what she represents to her album cover. That was very like 60s to me with the whole sailor and you know, if you saw it, you know what I mean.
It has that like 50s postcard vibe
exactly.
to it. Yeah.
So I did like it. I really did like the album cover. Out of a 10, I would rate this album like a 6. A 6 because her lyrics are really good. And she even says that her music and her album is more of a psychological musical endeavor more than anything. So again, it's kind of one of those albums where you have to like sit and chew on. So yeah, I would give it a 6 just because it's not my favorite. How you said, it's kind of repetitive. Every song is very, very similar. So a 6. I'd say a 6.
Yeah, I'd probably give it around the same. I'd lean more towards like a 5.5. I honestly...
Ooh, a 0.5.
5.5, whatever you want to call it. I would honestly say like if you don't listen to this record as part of her overall discography, that you're not really missing out on much. I definitely am glad that I listened to it, but would I go back and seek it out? Not necessarily. But on that note, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll talk some more about some more dancey fun stuff.
Always on the go, but the day just won't be one without your Hollywood fix. Let Golden State Media Concepts Entertainment Podcast take care of that. An all-inclusive look of pop culture.
Hello and welcome back to GSMC Music Podcast. Right before the break, Keith and I were reviewing Lana Del Rey's recent album, Norman Effing Rockwell. And we're going to move into a different album now, different genre as well. So Keith, do you want to take it from here?
Well, I mean, not for the rest of the podcast.
No.
Right? I'm just introducing the record that we're talking about.
Right.
As my like 2019 album pick for this year that I made Cynthia listen to, since that's part of the premise of what we do on this podcast is we make each other listen to the music that we like. We listened to the new Holy Ghost ! Record, Work. I like this record a lot. What did you think about it?
It's funny to me. First, when you first like typed the title out for me, I always thought that the exclamation point was another typo. Because last week's podcast, there was, I think it was, who did we talk about last week?
Oh my goodness.
Starts with a C.
Starts with a C. Oh, Clipping.
Clipping. I think Clipping also has. So I was like, is this like your thing?
Oh, yeah.
Putting exclamation marks. Anyway, that's off topic. But
records with exclamation marks in the title or bands. Yeah, that'd be a good thing to have.
I know. But anyway, so my thoughts on the album Work by Holy Ghost. Never, ever, ever heard of them. However, I didn't hate the album. I actually kind of liked it. I found myself grooving a little bit, bobbing my head to a few of the tracks. So no, I actually enjoyed listening to it. It's like synth pop, right? That's
kind of, yeah. That's the general overall genre that it would fall under.
The sound, I looked up what synth pop was. 'Cause I was like, I have no idea what this is, and it says that the majority of the instrument playing throughout the song is synthesizer. Can't even say that. So I did like that sound. I really liked the keyboard, and again, I thought it was really groovy for some reason. It reminded me a lot of Stranger Things.
Yeah. They definitely have that 80s. Now this is a genre that's they kind of fall under, but not really. Called vaporwave. Have you ever heard of vaporwave?
Nope.
Vaporwave is ambient synth music. It started. Well, I don't know if it started necessarily, but it kind of had a resurgence when people started sampling the Kmart music tracks that they played in Kmart's when we were all kids, and they would take those and adjust things within the sample and then put them over the top of clips from the Simpsons. And then it was called Simpson Wave. So there's a whole bunch of this big movement on YouTube for all of this stuff. But all that to say, it has that same kind of vapor wave, very the word that you'd probably use for it is vibey feel. It creates an atmosphere with a very specific set of emotions that are within that atmosphere.
It just made me feel happy for some reason. I was I just feel I'm in a good mood.
Yeah,
it definitely put me in a good mood.
Yeah, and it's got a lot of that four on the floor, just kind of constant beat where it's just kind of moving. And you said it feels kind of bouncy, and that's definitely
yeah. I caught
true.
myself with the bounce. I was definitely hitting with the beat. So I definitely enjoy that because I'm very I'm a big. I like to dance. So any type of music, whether that's R&B, hip hop, synth pop, now whatever it is, as long as it has a nice bounce to it, I'm able to put my steps to a beat. I'm gonna enjoy it, and it also, and Keith disagrees with me on this one. This record reminded me for some reason. This is the type of music they play in H&M stores or Forever 21. And they definitely do.
Didn't we talk about Forever 21 going out of business last week?
We did, but
there's a dead reference. Cynthia.
No, but there's still some up. But H&M for sure. That's definitely the music I got. Just because it does put you in a good mood. It definitely put me in a different. How you said it created some type of atmosphere. Even though I was listening to this album in my bed. So no, I definitely enjoyed it. I'm glad you introduced this album to me and this genre, because I really have no prior knowledge until now. The little do I know.
Yeah. Though I am surprised. I don't know if I'd say that this is the type of music that you would hear in an H&M. It does. I don't think that it has enough of that bland background type sound to it for it to kind of drift off into the your subconscious and for you to not know that it's there. And I feel that's most of what they do with music that they play in places where you're shopping. It's this subconsciously happy music. Whereas I feel a lot of the songs on this record really stand out, and they're kind of more memorable because they're taking tropes and elements from genres and records that we're more familiar with, and then kind of giving them more of a little bit of their own modern spin. The song, I think it's called Soon on that record, has pretty much the same drum beat as Everybody Wants to Rule the World, which we'll be talking about later on this podcast because Keith loves Tears for Fears. But it has that same beat, but does it in kind of a new, interesting way. Have you ever heard the song Always Something There to Remind Me? It's another 80s hit.
By who?
I have no idea who it's by, but it's got this really big intro with this drum solo. It's do 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 do. Boop, boop,
I
boop.
might know. That's the thing. I'm not the best with names, but if I hear it, I'm probably I might have heard that, here or there. And so for you, what would you say, what were your favorite tracks besides Soon?
I definitely like, I can't remember the name of the opening 2 tracks, but they really establish kind of like the feel that you get throughout the entire thing.
I agree. Those, it was like part 1 and part 2. I can't remember the name of the tracks too, but that's actually what enticed me right away was the beat. I was like, that was a good introduction and like a good move on their part to kind of put like one of their 2 strongest hits in the very beginning of the song or of their album. Cause again, that's what kind of like brought me in. I was like, what is this sound? It's a new sound I've never heard, even though it's more of like an 80s or more popular back in the 80s. For me, I really liked Anxious and Do This.
Yeah, those are both great tracks.
Yeah, so both of those, again, I found myself kind of like bopping my head, moving my shoulder a little bit. So no, I honestly, I really enjoyed it. So thank you, Keith.
Yeah, I feel like I'm a little surprised to say that you haven't heard any of this kind of stuff before, that you're not familiar with the genre, because like a lot of the rap or R&B or hip hop artists that you listen to, they sample and do a lot of things with these kind of beats. So like that song Drake has, like I Think We're Going Home or Let's Just Go Home.
Yeah,
that song,
you're right.
It has that like same like driving 4 on the floor constant beat going throughout the entire thing that I think really lends itself to like a similar vibe to most of this record.
And now that you mentioned that, I'm now making the connections in my head right now. I'm thinking of like some hit R&B / hip hop songs that do tie in with that like synth pop feel to it. So now that when I listen to that genre R&B, I'm going to be now making that connection like, oh, so this is actually brought in. But it makes sense. It's all like, crossovers. That's kind of, I feel like, what makes hit songs now is just bringing different elements, different genres into one piece, which we'll also get into the mixing of genres later with another album we'll talk about. So out of 10, what would you rate this album?
I would give it pretty high marks. I really liked it. I thought it'd be like an 8. I was going to say 7.5, but it's an 8.
I know. I heard this.
No, it's an 8. Pitchfork and a lot of the other like regular critics of records didn't love it. They felt like it was kind of like too much of an homage to records of the past. So they felt that it was too derivative of like Tears for Fears, for instance, or probably even like Mr. Mister. Those are both artists from the 80s who were, pretty well known at that time. And they basically said like, oh, they're just kind of doing the same old song and dance, but with like their Holy Ghost spin. Because Holy Ghost has been around for a while. They kind of had a resurgence in popularity after they partnered with James Murphy of LCD Sound System. And they really kind of enjoyed a lot of the music that he did. And they've kind of been making music along those same lines, but also with like a lot of references to the 80s. Like even the album cover, the art on the album cover is a reference to like some civic project that was done in New York. This woman wanted to grow like wheat in this 2-mile stretch between where the Twin Towers were and the Statue of Liberty, which is like a really obscure reference. And so they felt like a lot of the record was just kind of like self-serving, referential, derivative. So they didn't enjoy it as much as like I did. I would recommend this record to anybody who's interested to getting into like the synth pop genre or is interested in getting into like kind of the more alternative scene. I think that it kind of creates or has like a very accessible sound to it. And it's a really good, I guess, gateway band would be the way that I would phrase it, to getting into a lot of like the more, I'd say there's a lot more interesting bands that you could get into that are in this same kind of genre. But what are your thoughts overall?
I agree with you. I do agree. That's more like, I think this was a good album for like a gateway album for me personally into that genre, exactly as you said. Because maybe if I would have listened to different artists, I may have not liked it as much. But out of a 10, I would rate this like a 6. Again, it's not my day-to-day music I listen to every day, but it's definitely a genre I see myself picking and choosing certain songs and playing in the morning. So I would recommend this album if you are an alternative listener and like that genre. I definitely do recommend this album.
Yeah, which songs off of the record made it onto some of your playlists? And which playlists did they make it onto? I'm really curious to know.
So Anxious made it into I have like a Sunday mornings jam.
Okay.
So Anxious did that. And my Sunday mornings jams is just like music that makes me feel happy pretty much. So that's just what's going to put me in a good mood. So I did put Anxious on there, and I put the very first track that you and I can't think of the name, the part 1.
Yeah.
So no, they definitely, a couple did make it into my playlist, which that's a big thing because I like a lot of different type of music, but not all of them get added to a playlist. So that was a big one for me. And moving on, so we're done talking about Holy Ghost work. We're going to quickly move on to another album that we are reviewing by Dillon Francis for his mixtape / EP called Magic is Real. Now, dance and like techno has really, I feel, swept the US now, especially like our generation. There's so many music festivals now that are tech based. Like there's EDC and what are the other, Crossed in San Diego.
Electric Forest, isn't that one? And they have that one in like the Midwest somewhere.
I think so. And the only reason why I even know slightly a little bit about this genre is because my sister goes to like a lot of raves. She goes to a lot of those festivals. So the only reason why I even know who Dillon Francis is because of her, which is so bad because he's like a major DJ. I didn't know that.
I mean, I'd never heard of him until you suggested him to me, but
okay, we're on the same boat.
Probably just because like he doesn't really make the kind of music that I enjoy, if I'm being super honest. So.
Right. No, and it's not all the albums we're reviewing this week, you guys, it's not my the typical music I listen to, but I definitely could appreciate Dillon Francis. Like I could definitely see why he has such a huge fan base. And actually the very first time I heard about Dillon Francis is when I went to Coachella 2017. He was one of the headliners.
Humble brag.
But I saw Travis Scott instead. So
I mean, you made the right decision there. Travis Scott is excellent.
Yeah, no, I did enjoy Travis Scott's set, but Dillon Francis, don't get me wrong, when I was walking by his set, it was jam packed. But
I'm sure
it's definitely pretty much his mixtape. It's dance pop, a fusion of deep house and Moombahton. Have you heard of this genre, Moombahton?
No. Can you describe it?
I had to research it too, so I honestly didn't know. So it's a fusion of reggaeton, which is Latin music, a type of Latin music, and a fusion of dance. And I think that's why I honestly, out of all the albums we reviewed this week, Keith, I liked this one the most.
I liked this one the least.
Oh my God. Okay, so we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to debate about why he liked it the least and why I liked it the best. So we'll be back.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back to the GSMC Music Podcast, where we are talking about Magic is Real by Dillon Francis and why I ultimately feel like it was a really poor representation of club music.
Ooh,
I don't like this record.
This is where we're gonna butt heads a little bit, but that's okay because that's what's gonna make it interesting.
Are you calling me a butthead?
A little bit. I am. So let's just get something straight.
Okay.
There's like two different club scenes, right? There's the hip hop scene, then there's like this dance tech scene, which I feel the majority of the people are split. Like you're either one or the other. Like my sister, this is their Drake. Like if you're a fan of tech electronic music, Dillon Francis is like the Drake of that genre.
I thought Calvin Harris was the Drake.
Oh, Calvin Harris. Yeah, Calvin Harris. But Dillon Francis is actually one of the bigger ones as well. I mean, to be one of the, like,
I mean, they're both awful, but
I mean, I can appreciate it. Like, I didn't add any of the songs to my playlist because after
none of them were good.
No. So let me quickly explain why I did like it. So Moombahton, like I said, this is a fusion of Latin reggaeton music and house music. So for me, like being Latina, I obviously like reggaeton. So it was a cool sound and a cool fusion to hear because I've honestly never heard anything like that before. And actually, Dillon Francis, he gained a lot of popularity because he helped popularize the Moombahton genre. So that's really his main thing. So that's maybe why you probably didn't feel like a connection with it. I probably felt like a deeper connection just because I'm like, oh, this is like my roots, you know?
Yeah,
so,
it appeals to some nostalgic part of you where there's a little bit more familiarity with like different aspects of the genre. Because I'm not a big fan. Like reggaeton is.
You said it good.
I can roll my R's. Thank you. I know I sound like an uneducated white guy, but I am multifaceted.
Well, I mean, you're from California. It's a mixture of people here.
It is. Yeah.
I mean, but so because I liked the Moombahton part of his records, some of my favorite tracks from his project were DFR. I have no idea what that stands for.
I don't think we really want to know.
I was thinking like Dillon Francis something.
I assume that it has an expletive in there. That just seems like something that is like common in that landscape. But, you know, if you figure it out, let us know in the comments below.
Exactly.
I mean, censor yourself. Small children read those, but, you know.
So DFR was one of my favorites. Salsa Baton, Shake That Booty.
Oh, that song is hilarious.
That one,
How many times can you say booty in a song?
I know.
Like, I felt like they thought that, like, the more times we say booty, the higher likelihood we have of getting on the Billboard Top 40 because they say booty like every 2 seconds.
I know. It kept saying shake that booty like a moneymaker.
Which doesn't make any sense to me. Like,
it just makes you want to dance. It's just one of those records. It's like, that's his whole, I think his whole, what's the word I'm looking for? Not message, but his whole goal with the project is just like party music. Like it doesn't have to have a message. Like it barely has lyrics. It's just beats.
Yeah.
And to be honest, most of the people who listen to this genre, I mean, it's at raves, at festivals. They're on some type of substance or, you know, like.
You would have to be to enjoy this. I'm just being honest. Like when you're in like a sober mood, unless you're like hacking a computer in the 1990s in like a really bad movie, then like you're just not really I feel like you're not gonna connect to this necessarily. There's a lot of like beeps and squeaks and squawks and like there's a couple drops that sound like dubstep, and like I'm not opposed to beeps and squeaks and squawks, but like use them in an interesting and unique way. Don't use them as like a way to artificially facilitate an emotional response, because I feel like what he's doing with a lot of the stuff that he does is he builds up this like synthetic excitement, because he's not doing anything musically unique. He's just making the notes go faster until he gets the ticka 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 boop. And like even when you get to that like the drop, as you will, it like ultimately to me it doesn't feel all that satisfying because it doesn't do anything unique. It's like I've heard this before. That's
where I do agree with you. So that's the part I didn't like in those like the salsa Latinish songs on his records. I didn't like the drops. Like that's why I don't like techno electronic music, because I don't care for that whole like dun dun dun. Exactly, you said it's kind of like very generic. It's all the same. So there was like a minute into each of the songs, it has some type of drop. So that's kind of where I tuned out, because I'm like, I'm not like into that. It's again, I was playing this in the car, so I'm like, I had to turn my bass down. It's too much for me. Like, I'm completely sober. But another song that I did like was Bombaclot featuring Bungie Freedia. And this one I liked because it was more like Rastafarian vibes. Like, it reminded me of like Bob Marley. It had, so I did like that kind of change in music. And then another one is Body, spelled Bawdy. So like body, you know. Body. There's a body and then there's a body, right? And that one, again, it just makes you want to dance. Like, that's why I really enjoyed the Moombahton genre part of his album. And for the final, so those are my top ones: Body, Bombaclot, Salsa Baton, and DFR. So those were very high energy. And again, would I go back to like the album and listen to these records? Probably not. But it's one of those songs, like this type of music is something I can kind of like hear in the distance. Like, if I'm walking past a house party and I hear it, I wouldn't mind. But being inside that house party, I probably would hate it. Cause again, I just like the drops is like what causes migraines for me. And it reminded me a lot of my cheerleading days, because most of my cheer, I mean, if you ever been to like a cheer competition, they have all of those drops. All the cheer mixes have that same sense. Beat, because I mean, you're trying to hit on the beat. So but overall, I was able to listen and enjoy the music. I actually listened to the whole thing twice. It's only 7 songs on the album, or EP, I should say. It's EP.
Yeah, I only had to torture myself for like 25 minutes to get through the whole thing.
No, to be honest, I feel like if it was more than 7 songs, I probably wouldn't have been that into it. It's just, I would have tuned out. But no, I enjoyed it. I really did enjoy it. How about, what are your thoughts? I know you have a lot more to say.
Well, actually, I'm kind of curious. So, we're talking about reggaeton and a couple other things. So, like, is reggaeton related to reggae, the genre?
There's like certain similarities. I mean, I'm not sure which one. They're both connected in some way. Like, it's in the name, right? But reggae is more like, they're both from islands. Reggae, I'd say, is more Caribbean, Afrobeat style, whereas reggaeton, it has more of like, I don't
like
know how to
Latin
explain it.
Music feel?
Latin, but it's like Spanish rap. That's like the closest thing I can like say. You know Daddy Yankee.
I do not know Daddy Yankee.
Oh my God. Okay, you guys, let me know in the comments if one of the episodes, Keith and I should do like a Latin, because I feel that'd be so funny to hear.
Oh, I have a Latin band that you should listen to. We could totally do bands from Mexico next week if you want.
Yeah, or just like Latin music in general.
Yeah.
I think that'll be a good one. All right, we're gonna do that one in one of the weeks coming up. So, out of a 10, what do you rate this?
3. It was awful. Honestly, if you're going to go listen to like any kind of like house music or club music, like find something that's semi-original or at least like accessible. This was just really, honestly, half of the songs were so frenetic and grating that I couldn't get into it. And it was just really a difficult listen for me to get through. I could appreciate and understand why people might like it, but as far as like on a scale of just purely on a creative, critical originality scale, it doesn't do anything interesting or unique that you can't hear done better by somebody else. I
disagree. And because Dillon Francis is the one who he didn't start the Moombahton genre, but because of him, it did gain a lot of popularity. I actually read the Moombahton genre started in the 80s, and I can't forget the guy's name, but
you can't remember?
I can't remember. Yeah, I can't remember the guy's name, but I know it was started in the 80s. But no, I got to give credit where it's due. I do give Dillon Francis credit for he put this genre on the map, because a lot of people didn't know about this area of music until he came in the scene and started with that Latin fusion. So no, out of a 10, I would give it a 6.5.
Okay.
6.5 because
it's still a D plus. I mean, like it's not.
Okay,
you're
actually
still
a 7.
saying it's not
it's
good.
A 7
okay,
because
now it's a C.
Well, now that we're doing an A, B, C, D's, I must say a 7 because it barely passed for me. Again, just because of the Latin component, but I could be a little biased because of that. But no, I definitely enjoyed it. I liked it.
Okay.
Out of a 7. So 7 to a 3. You can let us know in the comments what you thought out of a 10.
You can type in those comments why it is that I'm correct. On that note, we're going to take one more quick break. And when we come back, we'll talk about a record that all of your parents probably listened to.
Watching TV has changed over time. Streaming has become the new norm. That's why Golden State Media Concepts television podcast dives headfirst to the world of cord cutting. Want to be on the loop of what's hot in Netflix? Or if it's not a preference, what about original shows in Hulu? We've got you covered. Join us as we fill in the blank and talk about movies to stream and what show you should be binging. This is the Golden State Media Concepts television podcast.
Hello and welcome back to GSMC Music Podcast. Right before the break, we were touching on Dillon Francis, Magic is Real, and now we're moving on to the final album we're reviewing for today's show, titled Songs from the Big Chair by Tears for Fears. Mm-hmm. And again, I have never heard of them until Keith sent me this album.
Whoa. You've never heard of Tears for Fears until I sent you this record?
Well, I didn't know the name. I'm going to discuss. I did hear, like, when I was listening to some of the songs, I was like, I feel like I heard it in a movie.
Yeah, people sample these songs or
yes.
use them in movies.
So I think I've heard it in samples, but to be honest, I had no idea who Tears for Fears, who they were.
That's unfortunate. This record's really good.
I live under a rock at this point. Like, I
live under a rock too, so.
It's fine. And this was actually released in 1985, so I wasn't born then, but.
This record is 10 years older than you are.
Yes. And I still never heard of them, but it's fine. And I want to know, what were the records that really you connected with the most?
You mean the songs on the record?
Yes.
I love Everybody Wants to Rule the World. I think that it's such a great track. The interesting thing about a lot of these records from the 80s is that they're playing on these really profound ideas in psychology or philosophy, which I think is hilarious because the musical content feels so like light-hearted and happy, but like the title of the record, Songs from the Big Chair, is based off of this play or TV show or something about a woman who suffers from multiple personality disorder. Wow. And she can only be herself when she sits in her big chair. So like the songs are supposed to be representative of like multiple personalities that the guys in the band have. And then they're talking about like common psychological things that people do. Like Everybody Wants to Rule the World is like a fun track, but it also is saying something interesting about like the human experience as well, which is why I think it's so interesting and why I like it so much, because it's using this medium of like light, poppy, dancey music to convey this really dark kind of concept. Mm-hmm. But like what songs off the record did you really connect to and enjoy?
To be honest, I didn't like connect with any, but and it's only because I felt overwhelmed when I first saw the track list.
Yeah. You listened to the
super deluxe
5-hour
album,
super deluxe version.
No,
yeah.
I could not even listen to the whole thing. I was
no,
like,
of course not.
there's no way I'm going to sit through 5 hours.
Yeah.
And it's because there's so many there's like 5 different versions for one song. Like for Everybody Wants to Rule the World, I saw one that's like the extended version, the acoustic version, the I can't even think of the third one, but there's just so many. There's also like a lot of versions for Shout. I like Shout, actually.
Yeah, there's been a few covers of Shout.
So, and again, most of those 2 songs I feel like I heard in movies and in samples, so I was trying to remember exactly from where, but I couldn't. But to be honest, yeah, I couldn't really connect with the album. And I think it's just I have very little knowledge of the band. I have very little knowledge of the genre as a whole. So I think that's why I just wasn't that into it. It reminded me of a lot of Guitar Hero. Like when I heard of the songs, I'm like, I feel that's probably where I heard it. Like playing Guitar Hero, I heard these songs. So,
which is funny because I don't think that like guitar is hardly featured on this record at all. Like saxophone is a primary record on or a primary instrument on the record. So like half of the tracks have this really sweet, sultry saxophone on there. So I'm surprised that you would think of like Guitar Hero because
I think it doesn't Everybody Wants to Rule the World. There's one song I heard that had had a guitar solo.
I think it's a synth though. I'm pretty sure that like because a lot of the like this album features all of your standard 80s instrumentation. So you've got like your Roland electronic drum kits, your Jupiter synths, like those were all standard things in the 80s. So I don't know how much of the record is played on like analog instruments. I think a lot of the sounds that we think sound like something else are actually coming out of like a synthesizer.
Did you ever play instruments? You know a lot about the sound.
I was a music major in college until I graduated. I had to switch majors right before I graduated to English. So I have like 6 or 7 years of music, like studying music at a college level. So, and I've played drums since I was 13, which was like 15 or 16 years ago now. And I play guitar.
That's why I confused the synthesizer with the guitar and all that. The closest thing I ever did was play clarinet in like 4th grade.
I played clarinet
and
in 5th
I only
grade.
did that because I wanted to get out of class. But I really didn't enjoy it.
I did that because I wanted to learn to play saxophone, and at my school, to play saxophone, you had to play the clarinet first. But I wasn't good enough to play saxophone because I didn't practice my clarinet enough. So I quit and switched to percussion, and that's how I got into drumming. So.
Oh, cool. See, then the only drumming I did, again, was to like Guitar Hero. So my music abilities are none. I don't have any. But I did like the sound of the saxophone. I actually really enjoyed the sound of the saxophone. So no, it's more just, I feel like overall was kind of like, I couldn't listen to the whole thing. 1, it was too long, but 2, it overwhelmed me. So it was almost like, okay, I just need to like breathe for a second because I was like, where should I start? Like, which is the best version? Like, should I do the normal one, the acoustic, the extended? There's an acapella. So
when I give you a recommendation of something that's like more than 20 years old and it's a very popular record, I'll make sure to send you the link so that you don't end up on the super mega deluxe version. I'm sure that there's a lot of really cool things that they do with like the acapella Everybody Wants to Rule the World. It was like
over 30 songs. I counted. I was like, wow.
You know, the original record I think is like maybe 45 minutes long. It's like a standard LP. So
really,
it's definitely worth
what
listening
LP
to.
Is that like are we going back into EP mixtape?
Yeah, so there's EP, LP, and then now we've got like mixtape.
So what's LP?
LP is like, I think it stands for like full length play, and it usually means like it's a full size record. It's from like when vinyl was the primary distribution method of records. So an LP would be like your standard, I don't know the diameter off the top of my head, unfortunately, but it's basically like,
is it like
5
longer?
to 6 tracks. Yeah, it's 5 to 6 tracks on one side and 5 to 6 tracks on another, and it usually runs for about 45 minutes to an hour, but that's just because that was the amount of space that you had as far as like you could put grooves on the actual vinyl record. And then if you got longer than that, you'd have a double LP or a triple LP. So
there's levels to this, man.
Yeah, there's a ton of stuff. Yeah. Yeah. The music industry is really interesting, just the way that the terminology comes from.
Right.
A lot of it comes from the actual like concrete resources that were available back in the day. And I'm saying back in the day with air quotes. That's like my thing is air quotes. So
why air quotes back in the day? Is it because it's really not that like far?
Yeah, well, I mean, like if you look at the general scheme of human history, 50 years is not that far, not that long ago, you know? So like to say it back in the day, I don't know. What day are we referring to?
I know. It's weird, huh? Especially because we're getting into a new year soon and like we're getting into a whole new decade. So it's like what is like a throwback now? What is an old hit, a classic hit? So it is get a little fuzzy there.
Yeah, we should talk about dad rock one of these weeks where it's like, but like the dad rock, because a lot of people my age, I'm almost 30, most of the people my age are dads now. Like there's a lot of dads my age. So what we listen to is now dad rock, which is
That's
a really
so
weird
funny,
thought.
dad rock.
Yeah. So like, I mean, Jack White, The Strokes, who else is from the early 2000s that I can't think of right now? But like all of those bands that are in that same era, all of like that new metal, Three Doors Down, all that kind of stuff. Like it's all dad music now, you know? In 10 years, we'll be hearing that on the whatever local station plays classic rock. So I just think it's really interesting the way that everything kind of
I always think about that too. Like hit songs right now, my age, like 20, 30 years from now, like
is anyone even going to know about them?
Right.
Yeah.
Or like what's going to be the new wave of music? Like what are like my future kids going to listen to? Like what's the new generation?
Yeah.
It's very interesting.
You
I
know
don't like to think about it too much.
Forever though?
What happened?
What will be popular forever?
What will be popular?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. By Nelly. Isn't
Oh,
that
right.
Song?
Yeah.
I know. That song will never die.
Never. It kind of needs to, but.
And rightfully so. Oh, wait. I mean, we could probably have a whole episode on why the song by Nelly's so good. But anyway, we're getting towards the end of our time here, so we're going to wrap it up. So what are your overall thoughts on the record here before we go?
I would not listen to it. To be honest, it's just not me. It's just not me. But if you're
missing out.
I know.
That's
what I'm saying.
Out.
I think it's just because my personal preference. That's it. It's not to say that it's like a bad project or a bad record. That's definitely not what I'm saying. I didn't connect with it. It's just, it didn't fit me personally. So I feel like I honestly can't even rate it because it's just like I don't have any knowledge about them. So I don't even want to rate them.
Yeah. And I guess kind of like someone who's never listened to like the classic bands that kind of created the genres that we listen to today, it's going to be really intimidating to take a look back at them and be like, well, now I have to try to give an accurate rating as to what I actually think about this band. I can understand why you'd be hesitant to kind of like give the record an overall rating. Right. I think that if you were to maybe approach this record as like, I don't know, a critical listening exercise and think of it as like, what can I learn about the music that I listen to now by listening to this record that came out in 1985 and see how it's influenced all the things that I love. Because I guarantee you, like, all the people that produce Drake's songs, they've listened to this record, you know, and that they all love it. Yeah. And so I think that like looking at the record from that point of view, you could probably find a way to enjoy it and to get through it. I think that this record is almost impeccable. It's like a 9 out of 10, honestly.
See?
Like every track on this record is listenable. The space in which the record existed in, or the time and space in which it existed, it was doing something interesting and unique with established tropes of their time. So I highly recommend this record. If you're into the 80s, if you're looking to kind of figure out how that decade has influenced generations after, this is definitely one of those records that you've got to listen to.
See, I'm not the indicated person to be rating this, so I'm glad that you did, because you definitely know a lot more about the history of this band and this genre a lot more than I do. And on that note, you guys, thank you so much for tuning in to today's show. And if you liked it, let us know in the comments. Leave us nice comments.
Yeah, if you didn't like it, then, you know, what's that? Is there a line in Bambi where they say if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say it at all?
Exactly.
So we don't need to hear it. Yeah. Just go rate us 5 stars. If it's less than 5 stars, don't bother.
I'll take constructive criticism. And leave us stars. We like the 5 stars. Share this podcast with other music lovers in your life.
Subscribe.
And catch Keith and I for next week's podcast at GSMC Music Podcast.
Oh, and happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
Oh, yeah. Happy Thanksgiving and lots of food.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Music Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.